Well, this is my Peugeot 307, and this is how I bleed my brakes with this one-man system, the Sealey VS820.V4. I suspect it's version V4. You can, of course, pump the pedal, release, and then so on, but this one-man system, I prefer it because it's just easier, and my wife doesn't really want to pump the brakes while undo the bleed nipples. So it's a fairly simple kit. It has this plunger that you kind of screw there. It has a valve to release pressure, a plunger. So let me open it. There is the valve to release the pressure there. Hopefully you can see it down there. You screw that on top. Of course you screw it securely. Try not to cross-thread anything. You pour brake fluid to wherever you want. I normally put it to about here. There is a pickup that comes from here and goes to the bottom. So I tend to not go too close to the bottom. On the other side, it has an adapter that fits into the brake fluid reservoir, and you just kind of screw it in. And you screw it in, you pump it up to about, say, 18-20 millibars of pressure, or 1.1 bar of pressure, or thereabouts. Then you just go and bleed your brakes. You just open the bleed nipple, draw how much fluid you want. Of course, the pressure here will drop, so I pump it between each brake side. So if, for example, I've started on the rear right, I bleed it, let's say for example 250 milliliters. I tend to bleed from the brakes because it just purges the whole system of the old fluid. This will drop a little bit, so I'll pump it a few more times to my desired pressure, which is about 18 millibars. I'm not too sure you can see that one actually. And bleed the next set. So there is you can unscrew that and put it back in if you want. So the other thing is that you fill it up, you hook up this to the braking reservoir. I'll show how it works. Then you pump it to whatever, 18 psi, 1.1 bar, and then you have to leave it like 10-15 minutes or 5-10 minutes to see that this shouldn't have dropped pressure. If it drops pressure, you can have a loss of pressure somewhere around this system, around that system, like here or anywhere, or you can have loss of pressure somewhere around your braking system. The one thing, so try to, these bits and pieces, try to screw them up pretty well. And then the other thing is, these also, there is a hex here that you tighten, and that one also, there is a little bolt here, so tighten these two just so it doesn't lose pressure over here. Also inspect if you have any cuts or anything around here. This is kind of Sealey have done it, but that's about it. It's pretty simple system, and it works really well. I've bled my brakes quite several times with this system. It's actually quite decent. This is to release pressure. Once you've bled everything, then you release whatever the pressure is left in the system, and then you open it, pour it, and so on. Well, next, of course, to bleed the brakes. I'll only show the front left brake bleeding, that one, because it's fairly the same thing. At the rear, it's a little bit, on my car, the bolt, the hex bolt, is a little bit thickened, but it's exactly the same thing. I'm also replacing the two bleed nipples at the front because they are quite rusty. You probably can't quite see it, but the sides on one of the hex things here were really kind of getting to a point where you can't put a socket on that, and it's quite a little bit rusty, almost to kind of the bottom there. This one is a little bit better, but still kind of rust is going to that direction. That's the replacement. So it's supposed to be an official replacement, but this is 8 millimeters and that's 7 millimeters. They don't look too different, but they actually are different. But this is the replacement. It has the same shape and so on. The thing is that I'm replacing them while I can, while they haven't rusted so much that they have fused to the metal. So I'm replacing them now, and next time I might replace these in 2 years' time. The cycle for renewing the brake fluid in my vehicle, so I'm probably gonna replace them in 2 years again. So first of all, that's the bleeding nipple on the brakes. If you have a cap like I do, first of all remove it. It might be a little bit difficult to remove because they could be stuck with time, There you go, that removed alright. And next, of course, if they're really rusty, I have this one nylon brush, that one, and one metal brush. So I'll brush around the seat there, rub everything off pretty clean. First with the nylon one, just to any loose dirt. And then with the metal one, clean the seat in there. And next is to use penetrating oil. And I'll put a few tissues in case it sprays somewhere else, like that, and one underneath, just in case my PB blaster, that one I'm using as a penetrating oil. You can use any other liquid, and just spray a little bit around so it kind of penetrates in the threads. Try not to spray within the hole or anywhere around, and I'll leave that and probably spray it. It depends on how rusty it is. I just don't want to snap this off. Depends on how rusty this is. I'll spray this every hour or so, 4 or 5 times, just to be on the safe side, not to snap this bleeding nipple. So I have been spraying it for quite some time with this PB blaster to try to, maybe something will go inside the threads and loosen it up a little bit to open, not to break. So from this side it actually looks good, it's not that much rusty, but from the other side, one of the sides of this hex 8mm has kind of from rust has slightly crumbled, so I'm gonna replace both from that side and the other side, the nipple, the bleed nipples. And I have a replacement. This is supposed to be for Peugeot 307, but it's a 7mm thread, and this is also 7mm socket or hex. Well, this is 8mm, so it's a little bit thicker. So well, see how it goes. I mean, there are no other replacements for Peugeot 307. I'll clamp the brake line somewhere here with a hose clamp set, something like this. I mean, it looks quite good. It's rounded here and it's rounded here. It's fairly round shape everywhere, so it won't cut into the hose. So I'll put it in there above that thick thing and clamp it, then undo it, put the new one and screw it back on, and then for both sides, and then I'm gonna bleed the brakes. So first of all, clamping it with that thing, well, let's see how it goes. I mean, I don't particularly fond of clamping brake line hoses, but well, otherwise too much fluid will leak and some air will come up the master cylinder, so that's why, well, I'll clamp it, unfortunately. Not too much, that should have clamped it because it doesn't want to go anymore. And now to undo the brake nipple and replace it with a new one. Let's see how this will go. Yeah, that was actually okay. Started undoing, and I'll put some tissue around just in case some liquid leaks, but it shouldn't as it's clamped, but yeah, you never know. Well, nothing leaks, so I've clamped it well. Let's see if my new, so that's the old one, it's quite rusty actually, so I'll put the new one and see how this goes. Oh yeah, it actually works actually alright. It's just the size of this is 7, the other was 8, so that's actually pretty good. And then of course tighten it a little bit. Not too much actually, but and then release the brake hose clamp, and that shouldn't really leak anything. And release the brake hose clamp here, and then we'll see if that leaks actually. I mean, it doesn't leak anywhere, but I have to kind of see when I put pressure on the lines if that will leak. And then I have to do the other side, that side that had kind of broken off, to see if I can replace it. So now that I've replaced the bleed nipples, to start bleeding the brakes, it goes with, at the end, I mean, there is a small plastic thing that, but I've removed it, like a hose that comes on here a little bit to extend. I've removed that one. So that's tight, screwed on fairly tight. I'll put the cap, this cap, there comes a plastic thing from the kit that you can just tighten it, but first I just want to see if this holds pressure. So a little bit of pressure, I can't hold it with a finger too much, but just pump it a few times and hold with the finger, of course, just to see that I don't have any other. Basically, if I've screwed that one up correctly and everything else, I can hold half a bar basically. So that's okay now. I know these are kind of alright. Unscrew it and then fill up with liquid. I mean, there is a pickup that goes to the bottom of the tank, but I'll fill it up. So this holds 2.5 liters, and I'm gonna take 250 milliliters from the back brakes and 150 from the front. So roughly about, I'll fill it up 1.5 liters, so probably to about here, because 250, 2.5 liter and then 800, so 800, just not to go too much to the bottom. So 1.5 liters, so probably to about here. So I filled it to about there, so it's kind of probably, not too sure, probably 2 liters. It's probably too much, but I'll put it back in, although you don't want to put brake fluid back in the tank, but yeah, well, that's kind of alright. Next, to screw that one, try not to do any cross threading and so on, and I'll use the tool that they provide for tightening this, just to have it tight. I mean, Sealey recommends first of all putting this end on the brake empty, then pump it and see if there is any leaks in the brakes, but I do it with the liquid in there. So next thing is to pump it up a little bit, put a little bit pressure until it starts dripping here, and then put it on the tank and on the brake fluid kind of reservoir and tighten it, just not to introduce any bubbles, not to be any bubbles in the pipe here. From the reservoir, I mean, I was never be able to get this. There is a filter there, I was never be able to get it, so to kind of remove excessive fluid from there, like the old fluid, I was never able to remove it. Somehow it's always, there is like, it's always stuck. I was never able to remove it, so it will be without draining the old fuel. But if you can take this kind of filter there, it will be better if you suck up the old fluid to the minimal level. I cannot really do that. Next thing, to pump it up until it kind of leaks in there. I go start it and I'll tighten it up. Next thing is to pump the lever so it's connected to the brake fluid reservoir tank. Next thing is to pump it up with the lever until roughly about 17 psi or 1.1 bars, and leave it like that for roughly about, let's say, 10-15 minutes to see that the pressure hasn't dropped and your whole system, your whole brake system doesn't have any leaks. So now I'll pump it to 17 psi or 1.1 bars and leave it there for about 15 minutes. So I'll pump it to about 18 psi or 1.1 bars or so. So it's just on the 18, just underneath 18 psi, between 16 and, let me pump one more. There we go, that's about 18 psi, 1.1 bar, and I'll leave it like that 10-15 minutes to see if it will drop. So currently it's between 18 and 16, and I was losing a little bit of pressure, was dropping. But then what you have to make sure, I mean, I know these brakes are quite good, but just make sure all the valves around the whole Sealey are really tight, and you've tightened them pretty well. I mean, this doesn't drop at all anymore. You just tighten every single screw. I went around the whole system, all pipes, and it was leaking nowhere, but it's just a little bit of air coming out of the Sealey. So when you've bled a little of the brakes, this will drop a little bit, so you have to then pump it up to say 18 or so. 18 psi, 1.1 bars. So in order to have the pressure to bleed a little bit more. Then you have, that's the last one that I'm doing. You have your spanner. This is 7mm because these new ones are 7mm. I'll put this one first. Then you have to have your jar. I know I'm drawing 250 from each, and I have a line here that have kind of disappeared. And I put it down below. You probably can't quite see it. A suitable hose that will fit in there, and this fits in there. It's quite tight, but better be tight than leaking from there, leaking on your system everywhere. So better be a little bit tight and make sure that it fits. And then because that's a new bleeding valve, when I open it, it will be easier to open because I just replaced it. But then you undo it and it should start leaking. There we go, it started leaking. And until it's kind of 250 milliliters, that's what I'm gonna be doing. And then you close it, and that's about it. You probably can't quite see. It's fairly, unless you have some bubbles, then you bleed until you have no bubbles. But there are no bubbles in that system or any impurities. But you just wait. I don't open it too much. I open it only a little bit to kind of drain, but that's about it. So now I'll be waiting for 250 milliliters to draw from the brakes. And I'm trying to show the jar slowly filling up there. It hasn't yet filled up. And that's it. I'll close it. Not too much. And then try not to spill way too much. When you're doing the hose here, it will spray oil everywhere. I tend to just tap it quite a few times. There is the air coming up, so once it reaches that side, then I can open it, then I can remove the hose, just not to spray brake fluid everywhere. There we go, almost there. The last bits is coming up here. So, well, not to have too much oil. There we go. And that's kind of clean. Double check that I tighten it. Doesn't have any more to tighten. Next, of course, is to spray a little bit of a brake clean fluid around here and clean it up. To remove the system, there is a button here that you press and releases pressure. Then some of the liquid will come down. Then you can undo the system and undo the brake fluid reservoir. And I put quite a few tissues on around the brake reservoir just when I am undoing it, not to spill fluid everywhere. It might be a little bit on the full side because it has gone, and I've tightened it quite well actually. So there might be a little bit of a brake fluid because it will be pretty full, and then you have to siphon it off a little bit. Let's see, well, it's nearly to kind of the top. I'll tap this one. Yeah, hopefully you can kind of see it. There is almost to the top, but you have to just siphon it off a little bit in order to siphon off a little bit, because it's just too much to the top. And so I started about here and I have to about there, and I've drawn roughly about 1 liter fluid from the whole system. Well, this is how I bleed my brakes. One thing to remember, you have to always start from the farthest point from the brake master cylinder. In that case, the brake master cylinder is in that area, so it's to the front left. So you start from the rear right, rear left, front right, and front left on that particular car. So you have to know where your master cylinder is. It's not that entirely crucial. These are two systems here. The one side is one system and the other side is another system. So it doesn't so much matter, but still a little bit better than introducing air bubbles or carrying this air bubble in multiple branches of the brake system. That works great. You have to just make sure that you've tightened all the bits and pieces inside. If you ask me if your brake nipples are really stuck in, you can't open them, I can't really help you very much. There are plenty of videos around the YouTube, heat and so on, banging it. You can check those out. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hopefully you found it useful. If you have any comments, ask me down below in the comments. Thank you.